Rex, great to see you again, and thank you for being on the road with me this week.
It's my pleasure, Chuck. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Now, Rex, before this interview goes sideways, we have a lot of catching up to do. And I want to talk to you about your two new projects. The first is your new novel, The Archivist. Now, I was online at your website, checking everything out, listened to the backstory on a podcast that aired on the website about The Archivist, and it sounds really good. Now, if I have this right, the novel, The Archivist, was born out of a compilation of all your books, which are now archived at University of California, San Diego. So if I got that right, can you give me a brief description or an overview of what this book is about?
Well, about 8 years ago, I was asked to go to the country of Chile, and I decided to leave Los Angeles. And when I did, I had boxes and boxes of writing, because I actually go back to the IBM Selectric day, and not to mention discs and films and other things. And I'd been asked by my alma mater, the University of California at San Diego, if they could, they were willing to take my archive. And to me, I looked at it as like, oh, well, this is cheaper than public storage. But actually, it's a huge honor. And Geisel Library is an incredible library on the campus of the University of California, San Diego. Of course, Geisel is Theodore Geisel, who's Dr. Seuss. So I like to always say my work is next to Dr. Seuss. And so, went off to, Chile, and I came back, and they had a big event for me, a faculty club dinner with about 300 people. And I was I had to give a speech, whatever. But it was to, kind of commemorate, and there was a whole kind of opening of my archive, and I didn't really know what was involved in it. And it was, the woman who archived my papers, she spent almost a year going through everything, and I met her, and I started to get into the world of archivists, and I wanted something different from Miles and wine and whatever, and I started to get into that world. But now in comes the fictional side, and so I started to write Actually, I wrote it as a mini series, but then I got an offer from Blackstone Publishing to do it as a novel. So I ultimately took the mini series and made it into a novel. It's about a young project archivist, a woman who comes down to finish up the papers of a very famous writer, and her predecessor died in a drowning. And in the dark archives, she discovers a treasure trove of love emails, I guess you would call them, and other things as well. So what starts out is getting you slowly into the world of archivists and special collections and archives, which I did from, having had my own papers archived, the Rex Pickett papers. Then it slowly becomes it's a mystery, and then it becomes a murder mystery.
Well, a murder mystery. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So go on.
No, that's okay. So that was the genesis. I never would have written that in a million years had this is kind of like a little bit like Sideways. I started going up in the 90s to the San Ynez Valley just to play golf. And then I started staying overnight. I've told this story a million times. And then, oh my God, this is a wine region. I didn't know that. And I was starting to get into wine and whatever. So, some writers are, we're sponges. We soak up this stuff, and the idea starts to kind of form and gel. I'll give you, now I'm digressing a little bit. About 4 months ago, my archivist brought over a cat she thought I wanted to adopt. And she set the cat out of the pet carrier. It darted into the kitchen, broke a glass, went up a hole, and lived behind my cabinets for 7 days and 7 nights. Spy cams were involved. To rescue and capture her. And I wrote a screenplay about it. And now there's a good chance. I would, if you said to me, hey, Rex, write me an animal movie, because that's what my agent said it was, an animal movie, but it's more than that. I would have laughed at him. I already wrote that. It's called Sideways. But no, I'm kidding. But, seriously. And so that really happened. This 7 days and 7 nights with a cat stuck in my cabinet, and, so the archivist is similar. My papers were taken. I got to meet my archivist. I got into that world. It's a fascinating world. And, in November, there'll be a book called The Archivist. So
in November this year.
Yeah. It was a long journey because I originally wrote it as an 8-episode teleplay. I wrote out the entire teleplay. And right when I got to the end of it, I got an offer to write the novel. And so imagine that the teleplay was an adaptation of a novel I hadn't written. So now I got a chance to write the novel. So I parked the teleplay and I wrote the novel. And that's been a big journey. It's a long novel. It's about almost 600 pages.
Okay, that's fine. So So it starts, okay, so first of all, like how many boxes are we talking about? I mean, how many books, how many boxes did you give to this archivist to put together there at UCSD?
Well, there's at least 40 boxes, but and it's funny, I should have combed through them because she found some things in there that I didn't even know. In fact, she knows me better than I do because she read all my journals. I thought literally they were just going to put Pickett on the boxes and throw them into storage. Oh no. Oh no, Chuck. I mean, she went through every folder, every document. I mean, there's a whole, I mean, she lovingly, archive is, my papers and process is actually the word they use it. And of course, there's way more stuff to even be added at this point, which I got to make a note about. But it's at least 40 boxes, but it's actually more than that because there's a lot of stuff which is called born digital that wasn't printed out. It's on disc. So it's a pretty big collection actually.
You
But
mentioned,
all the original manuscripts of Sideways are in there. So those are analog. You can actually see notes that I've made. There's correspondence in there. A lot of correspondence these days is in email. So, we're still trying to figure out how to print it out, but it's just a fascinating world, archives.
so like your cat story, which is great, which could possibly turn into a new project. The
Right.
archiving your books, your writings, whatever, turns
Yeah.
into another project. So is this like these works, you're saying she knows you better than you. So can you jump back in there and maybe pull something out for another project that you kind of forgot about?
Yeah, I could go in and look at, I don't, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I wrote a mystery novel before Sideways, and that actually was the novel that Miles in the in the novel and in the movie can't get published. And had it been published, the mystery novel, it was called La Purísima, and La Purísima is a golf course in the San Ynez Valley. There's also the La Purísima Mission up there. And had it been published, and it got close, it got very close to being published. I had good representation, and we're out to major publishers. They would have, contracted me for the next in the series because they would have seen me as creating a detective series at that time. But because it wasn't getting published, I'm writing Sideways, and I'm the guy who, I write from what I've experienced, and I write from what I know. Usually, I mean, although I am doing this book called The Fixer about a Hollywood private eye, Fred Otosh, and this one has involved a lot of research, so it's different. But like the cat story, Aggie, is the cat's name. It just happened. I mean, it just came here. I mean, it was a surreal event. Sideways was kind of building more in me. The characters were kind of building. They've actually, there's been vestiges of those of Miles and Jack in previous works of mine, but I needed kind of new setting. But I didn't go up there to research it. I was just going up there to play golf, and then I would hang out at the hitching post, and I'd stay at the Windmill Inn. I was all alone. I was divorced, and my mother had had a massive stroke, and my younger brother, who just died recently, he took over her care and took all her money. And I was nowhere in the 90s, and it was a very inexpensive vacation. I could go wine tasting for free. Of course, now the Windmill Inn where I used to stay is called the Sideways Inn. I mean,
Yes,
is
exactly.
that and the clubhouse bar, which is where there's a famous scene where Jack is completely in a whirlwind over Tara, Stephanie in the movie, is now the Sideways Lounge.
Yeah, it's amazing the power of the pen. I tell you, we're going to get back to Sideways. I mean
Okay.
it's a movement. I mean, it is a movement, and you created a movement, and that movement's still going on. So real quick, back to the book. Murder Mystery sounds great. I want to buy it, and it's going to be released, you said, in November.
November, December by Blackstone Publishing. There'll be a lot of stuff about it. It's really, I want to say, it's not a murder mystery in the classic sense where there's a dead body on page one, and and there's a detective operating out of Paris or Barcelona or London or whatever. It's not that kind. It's really more of a literary murder mystery. It does become a murder mystery, but it's really more literary. It's really more about the ethics of an archivist, because the predecessor who died, she has an affair with the famous writer. That's highly unethical in this world. And so it deals with some pretty big themes. And the publisher, had a little bit of trouble with it because it didn't really conform to the genre, per se. And it's long too. But I think for me, it's a real departure from Sideways Vertical, Sideways 3 Chile, although I do miss those characters. But the two main characters are women. So that it's new for me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that sounds great, and I'm looking forward to buying a copy. Next question. You're a busy guy. So you have this new novel coming out, possibly a project about a cat. Now, you got these wines out, and you've released the Pinot Noir from Casablanca under the Sideways Signature Series by Rex Pickett. So how did this project come about, and when did this happen?
I was contacted by a guy who's now my partner and one of my best friends, Mario Velasco, in Chile, and this is literally 8 years ago, to come to Chile to write Sideways 3 Chile. And so I did. I went there and I fell in love with the country. And about 3 years ago, he said, "How would you feel about putting your name on a wine, a wine out of Chile?" I think he's actually almost afraid to ask me because he thought I would be selling out. I said, "No, I didn't make any money off of Sideways. Everyone else became millionaires, not me, So for reasons we won't get into, because we want this to be a happy podcast. But
We can talk about anything.
yeah, well, Sideways has been good to me. So but a lot of people did really, really well. But so I went to Chile. I fell in love with the country, and 3 years ago he asked me to do it. And so he did a deal with a winery, and we came out with a Pinot Noir, and it really exploded. I mean, we sold thousands of cases. They did ultimately come out with Sauvignon Blanc and a rosé. We had problems with them. I can't get into it for legal reasons. We're now with a new winery, and we've recreated new labels, and we're coming out in a month, and it's going to be big. I'd love to screen share and show you the new labels, but I can't. They're done. And but the first one, I mean, my God, we sold almost 15,000 cases, and
Well,
I mean. Yeah, in the first year. So that's the power of the brand. But the new labels are a little bit different. The winery is different, and there'll be 4 wines. There'll be a Pinot, of course, a Sauvignon Blanc, which I think is Chile's. I think it's their signature grape is Sauvignon Blanc, especially from Casablanca Valley. And what I call Red Harvest. It's a red blend, but I called it Red Harvest just to give it a name, which is actually Dashiell Hammett's first novel. And then there's a rosé, and the rosé is from various grapes, Syrah and I think Cabernet Sauvignon. I'm very excited about it. We have a new importer. We've got in the U.S. But the first wine, it just took off. It went to China, it went to Ireland, it went to whatever. But the winery we're working with disorganized and couldn't really handle what they had, and so we had to move on.
Okay, so new label, working with a Pinot Noir, a Sauvignon Blanc, a rosé.
It's still Rex Pickett Sideways, but it's a new label design, and it's just gorgeous. It's just beautiful. A new U.S. importer, and obviously we'll be reviving our. Where the first one sold big was in Brazil. I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil for some big openings. So it was just kind of seeing what the Sideways brand would do. And I said that I would put my name on a label only if the wines were affordable. So all 4 of the new wines, none of them are going to be over $13.99 retail.
Well, that's 14. Great. So very, very accessible. So everybody can enjoy them. So, okay. And when are you launching now? When does this, I mean, I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but people are still buying at retail. So when are you launching these wines?
I think it'll be end of February, early March. I mean, the labels are done, and they're going to be bottling next week in Chile. And
congratulations. So you have an import in the U.S. I noticed on your website you're supposed to be coming out early this year. You have an importer in Ireland. Is that still the case?
Well, we did with the previous winery, so we'll hope to just reestablish those importer connections, because we've broken with the previous winery. So,
So, and you'll be expected then, once we're able to travel again without like quarantining restrictions and all this other stuff, will you get back out on the road then to promote these wines?
Absolutely. I mean, I was supposed to be, I'm really kind of bummed because even with the previous winery, I was supposed to be in Hong Kong in last May. I was supposed to be in Ireland in June to do a big event. I did make Sao Paulo, but that was way back, about a year and 2 months ago. But, we're, obviously with the new administration here, we'll not talk about politics, but, there is a lot of hope that, things are going to really change. And, I would imagine I would get vaccinated pretty soon. So, we'll see. But of course, ultimately, we got to talk about New Zealand, because that has been a deal 6 months in the making. But yes, I'd get back out on the road. I would go out there, especially if I got vaccinated. I mean, I'm not really worried about it at all.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. So novel coming out, new wines coming out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You're busy, and what I'd like to do is just stay in touch, and I'd like to see what that label looks like when you can share it. That would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Sideways. Now we met in London about 4 years ago in 2016 when the play Sideways came to the St. James Theater. I walked by it, oh, maybe 6 weeks ago, and it actually, Rex, it's called the Other Place Theater. But I think you had an amazing, I think it was a 3-4 month run, and that
Yeah.
theater, we had the theater kitted out with the help of Ben White. With the theater kitted out with Sanford Wines, this Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, in the bar, on stage with the actors. For a while, I stayed in touch with Daniel Wayman, who played Miles.
I loved him as Miles. Because I've seen, 4 productions of my play. And to me, I hate to say this because if somebody sees this, whatever, but he was my favorite Miles. And
Was he?
he was the right age. He was, he had a kind of a hungry, lean look that Miles has, and, casting is a big thing. We go back to the play. I was doing for my Sideways sequel, Vertical, I was doing a book signing. This is way back in, 2011 at, what was it called? The Barker Hangar at the Santa Monica Airport. And it was funny. It was a thing called Pinot Days. And that's an interesting story in itself, but it was huge. There was like all these stations, pouring Pinot Noir. And it was this couple that had this, I don't know, they had an organization, and when Sideways came out, it just exploded. And they suddenly started putting on these Pinot Days events all over, whatever. And I'm over there just, signing books. It was a last minute thing. And a guy came across, this is how weird and lucky things are. A guy came across the street from a tiny little theater, a 50-seat theater called the Ruskin Group Theater. And we started talking, huge fan of Sideways. And he said, how would you like to do the live theatrical version? And I said, okay, I'll talk about it. And so we talked about it, and I had the rights. I looked in my contract. I couldn't take anything from the movie that wasn't in the novel, but I didn't want to. So it was all taken from the novel.
Mm-hmm.
I did the adaptation, and I said to him, I'll only do it under one condition, is we get to pour high-end wine for free every night. I don't want to charge anybody, and I'll make it happen. And I did with 2 phone calls. So we had 3 performances a week, and it was so much fun. And we sold out for 6 months. It was incredible. And then, we did. Winemakers often would come down and hug me and thank me. And I was at the theater every night. I didn't see the play every night, but I was there to pour wine, to meet people. And so it was, and then I contacted, I shot for the stars. I contacted Des McAnuff, who was the former artistic director. He did Jersey Boys, of La Jolla Playhouse. Now, La Jolla Playhouse is on the campus of my alma mater, the University of California, San Diego. And right away he said, sure, I'll do it. And we went straight from this little 50-seat theater to La Jolla Playhouse, the Potiker Theater. There's 3 theaters there. And that broke all records for a non-musical. And that was incredible. Then the rights were held up for 3 years for reasons I don't want to get into, but Mr. McAnuff and I didn't get along. And then finally, when the rights were given back to me, then I was contacted by the producers in London. And I said, yeah, let's go. And in London, I was, it was a great time, and, theater scene is fantastic there. And, and actually the exciting thing, and then it's been done a couple of other times, but wasn't involved in one production. I had to disown because of the director, but that first one at Ruskin, and even at La Jolla, even though I was kind of pushed aside a little bit, which you're not supposed to do to the writer, it's still, Des McAnuff did a great job with it. And I mean, he put on quite a show, and it was a big production for a non-musical. But guess what? We're doing the musical. And when we have all the songs, they're recorded. I could play them for you right now, but they probably wouldn't sound all that great. Maybe I'll send you a couple, and then you can, whatever. And I wrote the book. I wrote the lyrics with my composer, Anthony Adams. He's fantastic. And so in the kind of, I don't know, labyrinthian way my life seems to go, there's a possibility the musical will now be done in New Zealand. In New Zealand? Well, theaters are closed here. I mean, as of March, Broadway went dark. I'm sure London went dark. And London's dark. Yeah, I'm wondering, even with all the vaccinations, everything, people are going to be, you have to get people who want to come back in and sit in a packed theater. And remember, theaters, as especially like a musical, you can't have a 50%, capacity, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that's just not what theater is. It is meant to be live and in a packed house. And I wonder how long it's going to be before that happens. Well, New Zealand is COVID free. Nobody wears masks there. They're completely COVID free. There's no coronavirus in the country at all.
So, okay. So why, I'm just curious. I thought, going back to London very quickly, you were here, a lot. We're doing these tastings with people from the audience. The cast members would join us. You were hugely supportive. London, was that a success? I mean, I know I enjoyed it, and I got a lot of peripheral business from that, because all of a sudden when all of a sudden local restaurants found out that Sideways was coming and I had Sanford in our portfolio, just that generated new listings for us. So how would you sum up that run in London?
Well, I mean, I was treated very well. I got to be in the rehearsals and work with the actors. The producers were kind of new and they made some mistakes. The theater was great. The way it was set up for wine tastings, we did some upstairs, was wonderful. But the stage, it was a small thrust stage. Sideways, the play is very difficult to put on because it has 23 scenes and setting changes. There are a lot of plays, they only have two settings or two scenes. Think of Waiting for Godot. I mean, so it's a very difficult play to put on, and there were challenges there. I don't really want to get into it with the producers, but so it was, for me, it was successful. The critics were mixed on it, and I was told that by doing a play of a successful movie, that the critics would automatically be kind of against me, which is funny because at Ruskin Group Theater in Santa Monica, we won awards. We won Best Play, Best New Play. So, but London, the critics are pretty tough because they think, well, rightly so, that they're the heart of theater. It's the birthplace of Shakespeare, for God's sakes, So, and it's there's a lot of competition for theater there. So from the producer standpoint, it wasn't a huge success. From my standpoint, it was a success because I got to see a lot of things. Also, I changed something in the London version of the play. It was a major change in the second act. I won't bore you with it. It adhered more to the movie. But the irony is the play is not based on the movie. It's based on my novel.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, and so that's critics, you can't say this about them, but critics got that part wrong. But but the musical I'm really excited about. We got Kathleen Marshall, who is a 3-time Tony Award winner. She's, she probably hates this, but she's the sister of Rob Marshall, who directed Chicago, the Oscar-winning film. And she's really big in theater. So she's signed on board to do the musical. Now, whether she would come to New Zealand or not, it'll be whether theater opens up. I mean, obviously the pandemic and the shutdown of Broadway, I mean, we're talking about a $50 billion a year business just in tickets.
Yeah.
Gone overnight, gone. So when it comes back, it's going to come back in dribs and drabs, and it's going to be hard. But it isn't just Broadway. What we see is the possibility of doing maybe even a musical version of the musical, so doing a concert version of the musical in wine country, just going to wine country. I don't really necessarily need to be in Broadway. I don't need to be in serious theater, you see, but I'm excited about the musical because the play took the movie and opened it up emotionally. In fact, Des McAnuff said, I love the movie, but the play is richer and more emotionally complex. Whether that's true or not, I kind of like him for saying that. Alexander Payne is a brilliant director, maybe shied away from some of the melodramatic moments, but in theater, you can kind of get away with them. But a musical, it becomes more of a love story between Miles and Maya, between Paul Giamatti and Virginia Madsen. Because remember, in the movie, Virginia Madsen only has 12 screen minutes. She's only in 10% of the movie. But because of that one wine speech of hers, you think she's much bigger. She's only in 12 minutes. And that speech almost didn't make the movie. That's another story that I've told a few times. But in the play, she had to have a bigger role. And she does, because you wouldn't get an actress to be in for 3 scenes,
Right,
So I expanded her role in the play. But in the musical, it's an even bigger role because that love story is powerful. It's still Miles and Jack, but Miles and Maya is almost as big a story. So when everything shut down, we were really gearing up and raising financing. And, like I said, we've got a Tony Award-winning director who is attached to direct. It was a big announcement in the trades and everything. And then everything went dark.
So, because here in London, I mean, and I heard this a while back, that theater was looking realistically to open in April of this year. So once Broadway reopens, you get right back into those negotiations for the musical.
I'm not convinced that April is
Okay.
going to happen, so I think it's going to be the word. I have a theatrical agent, actually. Beth Blicker is a wonderful woman, and she says it's going to at least be a year. But even if it comes back, it's not going to come back the way it was when we left it, which is sold out audiences for Hamilton.
Right.
That's not going to happen, Chuck, because you got to get people who want to sit shoulder to shoulder, cheek to jowl with people. And even though you've all been vaccinated, you're still kind of scared and kind of wary, and I don't think theater will come back to the 2019 levels until 2022 in our country. And it may never really be the same, but New Zealand's a different story. We'll have to see, we're all kind of rolling with these punches,
Right.
But theater got hit really hard because it's not a place you essentially, you have to go like a supermarket. You don't have to risk it. It's expensive. And on top of it, you're sitting there you're touching people. They're right behind you. They're right in front of you.
You're cramped in. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the way it has to be. That's the excitement of theater.
Right.
The electricity is being cramped in. So imagine social distancing in a theater, watching, a musical or like Book of Mormon, for example. And you don't hear the laughter in the same way because you don't have the collective experience. You follow me? So, and not only that, theater, especially musical theater, is very expensive to put on. Hamilton costs $600,000 a week to stage.
600,000.
Yeah. How are you going to make money if you're social distancing in the theater?
You can't. 50% audience. You can't do it. Yeah.
The economics don't make sense. So, but I'm excited about New Zealand. Is
there a time frame for that?
Yeah. The big problem that started out as, again, like my friend Mario Velasco, calling me from Chile. This was a gentleman, Yusef Mura, called me out of the blue or emailed me, and we've been Skyping for 6 months, and it started with coming and writing Sideways for New Zealand. So that is definitely going to happen. But the problem, and then I said, well, we're doing the musical. It goes, well, we'd like to do that too, because they're, like I said, they're COVID free. I said, okay, great, but that was the talks began last May. And we talk all the time, but getting a visa to New Zealand is one of the hardest visas to get. And even some Kiwis are having trouble getting back into their own home country because, they just, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. It's expensive to quarantine, none of that is an issue for me. I'm just one person. But so it's definitely going to happen. We're there, but getting the visa is going to be a little bit problematic. But as we get more closer to a vaccine, then they won't have a problem with it. If I'm vaccinated,
Exactly. So then the story of Miles continues, Rex, because I read the first novel, and I think going back, when I think critics, you're right, when they saw the play, at least here in London, they compared it to the movie, but when they should have been, maybe they should have read the book first. Now, I have to tell you, I read, oh man, this goes back maybe 9-10 years. I read Vertical while I was on vacation in Maui, and that was a quick read. I must have done that over a couple days, and I couldn't stop laughing. So congratulations for coming up with a follow-up book that I thought was just as good as the first one.
I appreciate that, Chuck, because Vertical, unfortunately, I got involved with a publisher who was disorganized and unscrupulous and had to do a dissolution agreement with him. But, and it was originally going to be published by a major publisher, and then they backed out when they found out where I was going. And then I ended up winning the gold medal from the Independent Publishers Book Award. But it isn't like I just rehashed Miles and Jack going back to their old haunting grounds and Miles is getting married. No, it's 10 years later, again, drawn from my life. I was kind of flush now with the success of Sideways. So you remember the book in that way. And the tables have turned. Jack is now divorced and whatever. And it's more of an emotional journey between Miles and his mother, but it's a big road movie. And it probably kneecapped me in terms of, it being able to be made because it is a 4,000-mile road movie. And, even though Alexander maybe would have wanted to make it, it would have been a very, very tough movie to make, so.
Okay. Okay.
I
Well,
mean, but that's an other than the Merlot question. The number one question I get asked is, why has there not been a sequel? Because a sequel to Sideways is a complete no-brainer. Sideways 3 Chile is, it's not really the same, in terms of like it being a sequel, but New Zealand could definitely be a sequel movie. And
seriously.
then yeah, it could, because, well, for one thing, they're COVID free. Let me repeat again, there are a lot of people who want to go over there to make movies right now because they're, you can bring over your main people and you can, shoot. And hold on just 1 second, because this light is hitting.
Yep.
You hear me?
Yeah, I got you back.
I was getting some reflected light. It was just like, bothering me here. But so, Sideways, Vertical, the Sideways sequel. I think it would have been a great movie, but I don't think Alexander wanted to do a big 4,000-mile road movie. And Sideways 3 Chile probably didn't want to go to Chile, but I know he wants to reunite with Paul. And New Zealand would be a place a lot of people would like to go to. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Especially right now. And in fact, and if I'm talking too much, just stop me. But in fact, I might go over there with the possibility. So I'm going to go over there and like I did with Chile, research it, travel from the North Island all the way to the South Island to Central Otago, and whatever happens, and then I fictionalize and whatever, and I write my novel. But I might write it as a screenplay first, so that we could go right into a movie.
And then because Paul Giamatti is so associated with that character, even 16 years on, you'd have to bring him back into the role.
Yeah, this has been talked about before. I actually, among all these projects, I was with a young guy. I was writing a Sideways sequel, but it was about two young guys who go on a bachelor party, a stag party, or whatever, and they don't know where to go. And they see this movie called Sideways, and they think, well, why don't we just do that? So it's these two young guys who aren't Miles and Jack, who go to the San Ynez Valley, but they don't know anything about wine. And I wrote the thing with them, but the problem is I own the live theatrical rights, so I can do the musical, I can do the play, I can write Sideways sequel books, until I'm, in the nursing home, but I don't have film and TV rights. That is owned by Fox Searchlight, which is now owned by Disney. There's been some talk of a TV series or whatever. So the thing I was writing with that young guy is kind of, it got kind of, it would have had cameos with Paul and Thomas, whatever, but it would have been about these two guys. And I thought it was a clever way to get around, Paul either wanting or not wanting to do a movie. However, the New Zealand thing, the way, and I've never been there, but the way I'm kind of ideating it is, like Miles, I'm a little bit older, obviously, and Paul is too. And so he's more in it would be the end of the tetralogy. So it would be the fourth in it. And he would be in a more maybe philosophical mood. So it wouldn't be the wild and crazy Jack and Miles from Sideways so much, but people wouldn't really expect that. But I think that Paul Giamatti and Alexander Payne, they have not worked together since Sideways, and they had such a successful pairing that they would love to,
So finally, after 16 years, everybody's thinking about this now.
Yeah.
Amazing. And do you in terms of the film rights, does that ever revert back to you, or you just sold those rights off years ago? But you can still be involved as, say, like the screenwriter or something like that. How does that work?
Well, the contract is kind of complicated. I can raise financing, whatever, but to use the word Sideways and to use the names Miles and Jack, Fox Searchlight owns those rights. Now they might say, sure, fine, but the real reality is you need Paul, and to get Paul, you basically need Alexander Payne. And Alexander, great director as he is, he didn't want to make a sequel for a long time, but I think he's kind of opened up to the possibility now because he didn't want to repeat his success, and he has his own reasons, his own aesthetic standards. But to get to Paul, you pretty much need Alexander Payne. So it's really not about the rights and Fox Searchlight, because if Alexander Payne gets on the phone, it's a movie in 5 seconds automatically. It would be one of the easiest green lights on the planet, you know.
Okay, but am I saying, but I don't want to, I mean, I don't know much about the movie business other than like say you, I've got a few friends who work in the movie business. I don't want to come across as being naive, but it seems to me you're like, you're the backbone to this whole movement. So it seems to me they need your magic. They need your touch to like really get a screenplay, get a screenplay off the ground then. Would that be the case?
No,
No.
yes, I would like to think that, and I, from you and everyone else, they say, you know, not only did you write the Bible for this, I mean, let's face it, it wasn't the Immaculate Conception. They didn't just go up there and make this thing up, but it's also a very personal story. I threw myself in it very personally. So, but I get an email the other day. I won't even from, and they're thinking of doing a TV series. Somebody had pitched something. I go, and I just wrote this almost like a screed. Like, how could you possibly even conceive of anything without coming to me first? But these people are insensitive. They not to get on, you know, kind of a bummer here, but when the movie came out, there were just a lot of people going out and claiming credit for stuff that they never did. You know, just
It's your baby. It's your baby. It's your baby. This is your baby.
I know you'd think that, but 6 months ago, I get an email from, you know, somebody and high up in the food chain on Sideways. And yeah, they want to maybe do a TV series, but it doesn't have anything to do with wine. And this other person's going to write it. And I just read them the riot act. I just
Okay.
literally, I wrote an email that was almost screeching. How dare you, you know, do this or whatever. I'm going to pull out all the stops to stop this project. I mean, you know, why wouldn't you come to, you know, the original voice? Why wouldn't you? But they do, because they're, you know, Hollywood is that kind of place. It's for whatever reason, you know, they think they can, you know, get away with it. And yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's cutthroat. I mean, without a doubt. But let me ask you this: is there a relationship? Do you have a relationship with Paul Giamatti? You know, after this film, you know, or is it just everybody does their job and goes home and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, with Alexander, you know, we trade emails, you know, maybe every 6 months, you know, kind of like ships passing in the night, dipping flags ceremoniously, honoring each other. We obviously live in different places. Actors, I don't know any of them. You know, I met them. They were very nice to me. A lot of award shows, I would see them, you know, but they just go off and do their thing. So no, I've not been in touch with Paul. I'm sure he would be happy to, I think he'd be happy to reprise his Miles role under the right circumstances. And I think New Zealand might now finally be the right circumstances. You know,
Well,
I mean, I think they would love to go there with digital. Of course, we don't need a 200-person crew, and it's a film that could go into production. They just got to get me over to New Zealand so I can do the research, and it could really happen. You know.
well, I mean, that's great. You know, Rex, that aside, whether a sequel comes out or not, you've got a lot going on. You've got this new novel. You've got a project potentially about a cat. You're relaunching another set of wines from a different, you know, winery, a different label, a potential musical in New Zealand, possibly Broadway. Life sounds pretty good. Life sounds okay.
And by the way, I forgot, I'm also under contract to write my autobiography called My Life on Spec. And I wrote volume 1.
Wow.
And it was so long. I said, this is going to be 3 volumes. And the publisher said, okay. And an ex-girlfriend said to me, and when I told her, she said, well, I hope everyone's as interested in you as you are. No, I just started pouring it out, and volume 1 was so long. I said, this is going to be 3 volumes, and it's called My Life on Spec, and it's going to really lead up to Sideways, because it really is, you know, a story of, you know, I got to make 2 feature films with my now ex-wife, who's now the chair of NYU Tisch School of the Art graduate film. She won an Oscar for a short film in 2000 that I wrote. So I'm behind a couple of Oscars. That was a big deal. Then we fell apart. And then, you know, I went into nowhere, and then Sideways lifted me back up again. I mean, it's an incredible redemption story. And there's a lot of other in my personal way. It was easy. So I've got that project too, My Life on Spec.
That's great. Well, listen, I guess final question for this part of the podcast. Your main man or character, Miles, I find him to be very, you know, I'm talking about the book now. I find him to be very complex, witty, and a very flawed person at the same time. So can a guy like Miles ever find happiness?
Well, you know, I've in talking to Youssef, my producer, I guess, in New Zealand, he was taking me through starting on the North Island and going all the way to the South Island. And at the very bottom, I was reading, there's a little place called Resolution Island. I thought, oh, Miles ends at Resolution Island, and he's found somebody who makes just one, small barrel of Pinot. That's it. Down at the bottom of New Zealand, and maybe there, I'm not sure what happiness really is when people ask me. Happiness for me is working, and writing, and whatever. Unhappiness is, of course, being rejected and people trying to manipulate me, which they're always doing. But that's part of, when you set out to become a writer or a filmmaker, as I did originally, but then, became more of a writer. This goes with the territory, unfortunately. So I'm not even sure that happiness is a breeding ground or inspiration for ideas. I think sometimes you have to be kind of churned up. Like when the cat was here for 7 days, 7 nights, I didn't sleep. It was crazy. I mean, okay, so it wasn't but it was a drama, and so, but that kind of, stirred up ideas, it really gets you moving. And I think Sideways did the same thing. I couldn't get a novel published, and a mystery novel that I'd written, I couldn't get it published, but I wasn't going to stop, and I was nowhere. I mean, I was dead broke when I wrote Sideways. So out of that, but I found that comedy leavened it, but I think that people now remember Miles so much, and I always ask people, what is it about Miles? And they just say they find him so relatable because he's flawed, but he's still trying. Or as one person said, he's down, but he's not out. These aren't the people we see in movies generally.
Right.
They really are. He's a real three-dimensional, lived-in character, and that you're talking to him right here. I literally bared my soul in that novel. I bared my soul. Yes, I fictionalized. Yes, it's funny. No, a naked man didn't chase after me or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it's that bearing of, it's the personal side, I think, at the risk of immodesty, I'll say this, which has given its timelessness to Sideways. I just got an email yesterday. I get one every week from the guy. I just started reading your books. I can't believe how, great they are, blah, blah, blah. It's one of my favorite movies. I didn't know there was a novel. I've heard that a million times. So that's, I think, for me, the greatest, honor is that it's still today, 16 years after the movie, people still remember it fondly. Look, we're talking, Chuck.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you did a brilliant job when you're here in London with the play. Like I said, I thought the cast, hit the nail on the head there.
Oh yeah, unbelievable cast. They were, and the director, I got along. They just treated me really well. And even if the critics were a little, tepid, it doesn't matter. I had a wonderful time, and I loved the time in London. I really, it's a more literary scene. People think of me as somebody who wrote this kind of, I don't know, this novel, but just the other day from London, we'll end on this. The Academy Divan Library Publishing asked me if they could excerpt a chapter from Sideways in a book. They do kind of beautiful coffee table books. I hate to say that, with Hugh Johnson and with Kelly White and with Stephen Spurrier. And I'm like going, they write, these are like giants writing about Burgundy and Bordeaux and wine and whatever. And they're going to excerpt a chapter. And actually, I was in another book a year ago from Sideways. That's just really, I feel so honored by that. And I said, sure, go, yes, you have my permission. I'm honored because I want to be considered somebody who didn't just write this kind of one-off book, but all these people made it into a great movie, but it was just, just a trashy novel. And it's not, the source material, has depth, emotional depth to it. And people are still recognizing that today. And that to me is a great, that makes me happy, Chuck. How's that?
Good.
When I get those emails, those make me happy.
No, that's fantastic because I love the books. I'm looking forward to the Archivist. I'm looking forward to the fourth book in New Zealand when it comes out. Now, listen, before you go, first of all, I want to thank you for being on the road with me this week.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you 4 quick questions. I call this my bin and Q&A. So just give me one answer, short answer. You ready to go?
Me, short answers isn't my forte, but go ahead. I'll give it a shot.
That's fine. Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
What is your go-to quaffing wine?
It really, the Sauvignon Blancs from Chile are just astonishing, and still Pinot Noir. A friend just sent me some from Sonoma because I'm going to do something with them next week. Sauvignon Blancs from Chile and Pinot Noirs from anywhere, from New Zealand, Central Otago, or whatever.
Okay, well, listen, I'm making a note right now because I don't know when's the last time you tasted Sanford Pinot Noir. but I'm going to get you a new bottle. I'm going
Oh,
to get you a
great.
bottle of the new vintage 2017. You're absolutely going to love it. Okay.
Great, please. I'll send you my address.
Very good. Okay. If you could own any vineyard in the world, where would it be?
Well, I just had such a great time in Chile, and you can make wines less expensively there. You know, I got to spend 5 months in Tuscany, and I met so many great winemakers there. And I've yet to go to New Zealand, but boy, Centro Otago, I've seen pictures. It would be between those three, I'd have to
Okay.
say.
All great choices. If you could open a bottle of Pinot Noir, so your Pinot Noir with any celebrity living or dead, who would that be?
Oh my gosh. Gosh, I, I should have read your questions before, but I like to be kind of, I don't know, how about either Julian Barnes, the great novelist, because he's a big wine person, or Jay McInerney, or how about Kristen Scott Thomas, to put a woman in there?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love, for some reason, I'd love to meet her. I don't know why.
Great pick. What was the dream job? What was the dream job before becoming an author and screenwriter?
I didn't have any. I wrote and directed 2 feature films, and it was a very, very tough decade. I'm not sure I'd want to go back to directing again. I'd love to see my screenplays get made. I'm actually living the dream job right now. I might get to go to New Zealand to write a novel.
Wow, that sounds great. And the story's going to continue, and I can't wait to hear more. So Rex, it was really good to see you again.
Yeah.
If you come through London at any time to launch these wines, please, let's get together.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you very much for being on the road with me this week.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure, Chuck. It's great to see you again. Really is. And I'm counting on those wines from Sanford.
Hey,
I want to see what you're doing over there. So,
No. I'm going to put Todd Wolger on the spot. He's based up in Northern California. Okay. He runs the international side of the business. Okay. I'm here in Europe, but he's going to get you the bottles for sure.
Well, hey, we could put the Rex Pickett Sideways on a bottle of Sanford, a special edition of Pinot. I'll get you and your buddy to work on that. Okay.
Sounds good. Hey, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.